So it appears Kraven the HUnter may be the final film in Sony's Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe.
It's so hard to say goodbye.
So today I'm going to stop and rank all 6 films in Sony's Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe, from the shockingly awful to the not good, but at least kind of charming and fun. This is one of the most unusual and cynical shared universes that has ever been created, for the obvious fact that it is a shared universe based on Spider-Man, but which does not feature Spider-Man. Sony bought the film rights to Spider-Man and his Rogues Gallery back in the late 90s, and then shared universes became this massive thing with the Avengers, so everybody wanted in on that. So Sony has been trying to do that ever since. Back 10 years ago, they were talking about making Aunt May the movie, and at the time we laughed at them, thought that's the worst idea possible. Somehow, they managed to make this shared universe thing that makes Aunt May the movie seem like a pretty good idea. It was a bad idea to make a bunch of Spider-Man villains into anti-heroes, but beyond that, there was also like an impressive level of incompetence in virtually every single one of these movies, all while making these movies with writers and directors that have made good films and a bunch of really talented actors. At least 3 Oscar-winning actors are heavily like the leads in these projects. How did they put out so much garbage with so much talent? I don't know, but let's sort through the garbage and rank them the worst to the not good, but not the worst. In last place, Kraven the HUnter. Now, to be perfectly clear, I had an absolute blast watching this movie in the theater, but that's because very early on, everyone in my press screening realized that we were watching a shockingly bad movie, and it was okay to acknowledge that with our laughter. So our theater was filled with laugh out loud reactions from the crowd, basically from the beginning all the way until the end. And when the credits started to roll, the director's name appeared on the screen. Quite literally, the audience started clapping because we had such a good time watching this film. But the reason we had such a good time watching this film was because it was shockingly terrible. In particular, because at its core, it's a revenge movie of sorts, like a survival movie where you've got a guy running around with bear traps, slapping them on people's heads, stuff like that, that for someone like me, it's really easy to get me to enjoy a film like that. On a structure level, it feels like we're back in the zeros doing Ben Affleck's Daredevil level of structuring, where it kicks off and you do like a 20-minute flashback about the lead character's childhood that nobody wants to watch anymore. We realize that's a bad idea. That doesn't really work. No, we're going to do that again with this movie. And then the dialogue here is, just shockingly bad. Every other line from Kraven the HUnter is, how did you find him? I'm a hunter. How are you going to find him? I'm a hunter. Russell Crowe just keeps saying lines like, you must be strong like me. Don't be weak like your mother. Don't be weak like your brother. Be strong like me. He just keeps saying that the entire runtime of the movie. And then there's lines of dialogue that are just insanely stupid, where the female lead literally says something along the lines of, my grandmother died. I haven't seen her since. That's a line in this movie. And when it was said, our whole theater paused for a second, and then everyone goes, ah, because it's such a stupid thing to write. And then no one on set was like, I'm not saying this. This is stupid. They didn't fix it in post, despite this movie obviously being reworked, reshot, and corrected with ADR. They left that abomination in this movie. They spent over $100 million. They recruited 2 different Oscar-winning actors for this movie, and still somehow managed to put out just this utter nonsense on the basic levels. Number 5, Madam Web. Now, how bad is this franchise that Madam Web isn't in last place by a mile? Because this movie is another just absolute train wreck where on a basic conceptual level, it's confusing how something like this got greenlit because there's obviously no demand for a movie that is the prequel to the origin story for 5 C- level Spider-Man spin-off characters. Nobody wants that. Yet they made a movie out of it. And then from there, they made a bad movie out of it where from the opening sequence, there's shocking levels of terrible ADR where very clearly they reworked sequences and they're shooting like the back of someone's head so you can't see their mouth move because what they're saying is different from what was said on set. And then it just moves into just bizarre stuff about these spider people in a forest. And somehow it only gets worse from there. The crazy thing about this movie is that there was some original idea that was kind of interesting. The leaked plot from a couple years back is that this movie was basically going to be the Terminator with Madam Web. That Mama Parker is pregnant with Peter and Madam Web has to team up with the Spider-Women to save Mama Parker so that Spider-Man can be born. I don't know if that would have been a good movie, but that's a lot more interesting of a film than the movie that we got, where you could see where they just started like softening it and removing pieces. There are too many cooks in the kitchen and they're morphing it. And all of a sudden it changes into this whole other thing entirely. And pretty much everyone involved that has spoken honestly about this film has admitted this movie changed a lot. And Dakota Johnson, during the press tour where she clearly wanted to talk about anything besides this film, she openly stated that from when she signed on to the movie that we saw, it dramatically changed.
From what you read and you signed on for Madam Web to what we see on screen, was there a lot of changes or not so much?
There were drastic changes. And I can't even tell you what they were.
They took what was probably a dramatically better film that had a flavor to it, a distinct idea, and they just botched it through the overproducing, reworking the film. Reason it's not in last place is at least there's a little bit of an interesting idea in here of kind of doing Final Destination as a superhero movie. There's at least something in that pops a little bit. In 4th place, Morbius. Once again, this is a terrible movie, and it's bizarre that you have 3 different films fighting to decide who's the absolute worst and thinking like, man, were we a little bit too hard on Morbius?
First of all, Morbius, not as bad as everybody's making it out to be.
But no, Morbius also is a train wreck of a movie. And once again, there's something interesting in the film. The idea of a vampire superhero movie with someone that doesn't want to kill people, but they have a thirst for human blood, because it at least has a bit of a different genre to it. It does have some of those horror elements. Still a very bad movie. This is the movie that really made it clear, whoa, these Spider-Man villain movies are a disaster. Then the trailers featured shots of like Spider-Man on the wall, and we're referencing Venom. And so just like this confusion as to even what they were trying to do, what universe it was set in. And all of that, I think, is kind of the microcosm of the disaster that is these movies, that they never really knew what they wanted to do. They never really had a plan. They just knew Spider-Man sells. What else can we do? Put Spider-Man on the wall. And this lack of vision, a lack of a plan, and just constantly tinkering. Everybody gets a say. Let's move stuff around.
You have so many people involved in these projects. Nothing goes the way you planned it. When you have such a variety of people and opinions involved and decision makers, it's going to go on this path and twist and turns, and you just have to sort of let go.
That sort of disastrous thinking that is the antithesis of what you need for a shared universe. You watch the movie and it feels like just chunks have been cut out. And it just feels like the whole movie feels like that. They're just like cutting things and reworking it and Frankensteining it and reshooting it.
And they diced it up quite a bit. I had some hilarious lines that were cut out of that movie. 50% more of my stuff. There's a complete alternate ending to this entire thing. At some point, me and Tyrese fought Matt Smith. I shot for 6 days and none of that was shown. Because of COVID, had so much time to mess with it. They really messed with it.
Even tonally speaking, so much of it plays like our serious horror comic book movie. And then you have Matt Smith dancing. Just starts dancing a little bit. Like he's in a totally different movie. Then Vulture shows up in a post-credit scene that makes no sense whatsoever. And the trailers showed different footage of Vulture in the movie talking with Morbius, like when they were in prison together. So it seemed like there was like a subplot. It was supposed to play out differently.
Even though you didn't see him, scenes with Michael Keaton and Jared Leto, and I got butchered in that thing.
They cut this stuff and threw this, like, just literal Frankenstein monsters of movies, just patchwork together nonsense, no vision. Clearly the director doesn't stand behind it. And this is the same studio that a year ago, between Morbius and Madam Web, they put out Across the Spider-Verse. Sony. They did that masterpiece that was creative, well done, that they trusted the filmmakers, and then sandwiching Across the Spider-Verse is Morbius and the trinity of garbage that we got this year. That'll bring us to the top 3 with Venom: The Last Dance. And I don't think that this is a good movie, but it's not a total train wreck. Thus, in this franchise, it has made it into the top 3. So this one was a pretty big disappointment for me because as we'll get into it, I'm going to start being positive as we get into the next 2. I started to kind of enjoy the Venom movies eventually. And I was hopeful that this would be a satisfying send-off. And parts of it were what I was hoping for. It does manage to, tug at the heartstrings just a little bit, set a few things up to kind of move us into, the final 20 minutes and that farewell. It does that. And the big showdown of the movie, when we get, Symbiote Palooza, cool stuff. That's what I signed up for. That's what I wanted. This movie delivers all of that fun. But the whole movie should have been Symbiote Palooza. Not the brawl version of it, but the idea of that, like them getting released that happened like 60, 70% of the way through the movie. That should have been the kickoff of the film that audiences wanted from this film, that they know was the big hook, that was the big payoff that made the movie interesting. Instead, it turns into 60% Eddie and Venom just doing like silly road trip stuff. So instead of focusing in on this interesting stuff about a bunch of symbiotes, we have Eddie flying on the outside of a plane. Instead of having a bunch of interactions with all the symbiotes and instead of that, him riding with a bunch of hippies in a van and camping and stuff, and like realizing that the difference between Eddie and Venom, which one of them likes the sing-along time and which one of them doesn't. You chose to do that rather than spend more time with the extra symbiotes. One of these things is the unique value that your film can offer. And instead we got silly road trip humor that we can get in any comedy. And we have gotten in other comedies. That's the failed opportunity here. Let's go into the casinos. Let's do a dance number. All of this other stuff. Besides the most interesting things until the last 20 minutes when it does deliver. It was cool.
I'm very disappointed.
Our runner-up, Venom. Now, for a lot of people, they prefer this over Let There Be Carnage, but we'll talk about that in just a second. As for me, this is a movie that when I first saw it, I was critical of it the same way that I was critical of the bottom 3 movies on this list. That from the very beginning, there's been some choppy storytelling, very odd choices, tonal chaos, all of that fun stuff. But I think the difference is that there's an inherent charm to the Eddie Venom bromance that when I came around to that, I had a lot more fun with the Venom films, and in particular with the first Venom film. I do find it very odd that this movie takes such a long time to get to it. Like, you're literally like halfway through the movie before you start to have Eddie and Venom interacting with each other, and the backstory to get there is awfully convoluted, where there's a time jump and we're getting into Eddie's career, and there's like a little girl with a symbiote wandering around for 6 months trying to get to San Francisco in order for the plot to make any sense. And then once you get to Eddie and Venom, they just tapped into it, like the thing that was kind of missing from the comic book genre, which was just this lighthearted, unassuming, silly fun. A movie that doesn't take itself too seriously, with a lead actor that's not afraid to go wild, crazy, and goofy.
Hey, Eddie.
With his performance and everything like that. And that's what you get out of Venom. And that's what I enjoy about the first movie. They found something different, unique, and fun that is like very weirdly endearing and charming. But as for me, I'm throwing Let There Be Carnage in at number 1.
Can you have a better bad idea than this?
This is the best bad idea we have, sir. By far.
The rationale is very simple. What I enjoyed about the first Venom is that Eddie Venom bromance. Once that kicks in, that's the best part of the movie. And with this film, you don't have to wait until halfway through the movie. You get it from the very beginning, and you get the most interesting of the villains out of all these films, Carnage, played by a great actor, Woody Harrelson. Now, certainly would I have preferred that they did more with Carnage? Do I think that it played out too quickly? Sure. I'd say yes to every single one of those things. I get the criticisms. But I think this is the movie out of all 6 of these that best understood the assignment. What people wanted. Eddie and Venom and Carnage.
That costume is amazing!
Thank you.
So you get this Bonnie and Clyde Carnage romance story kind of going on where they're tearing stuff up. You get a final boss fight at the end of it. And you get the Eddie Venom antics, behavior, all of that very early on in the film. It's as simple as that for me. I don't throw it up there as one of the great comic book movies, but it's a nice change of pace to have a comic book movie that's not trying to be the best of the year. It's just trying to be silly fun.
I will let you eat everybody! Promise! I promise! Oh, yeah!
Just trying to get a single, just trying to get a double. That's all it aims for. Maybe it aims for a double, only gets a single, but at least we're getting on base with the fun. And unassuming, all of that. And while it is part of the shared universe, it doesn't really care about that. It's just trying to do its own little Eddie Venom thing with it. So for me, that's what I wanted from it. That's what I got out of it. So based on these very low standards, it comes in at number 1. Now, if you want to know my thoughts on some Spider-Man movies that are actually good, now you can check out my Spider-Man ranking over here or my reviews of the Spider-Man movies right down there. Thank you so much for watching. Keep talking.